Bava Metziah Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. We're holding Lema Mastis in the Lake Rabbi S. So the Gemara, Lema Mastis in the Lake Rabbi S. Shall we say that the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi S? Why? The Rabbi S says, Ha'amar imkein mahif sudame. We'll explain the case, but simple, it means, what did the Ramay miss? Now, Rabbi S, this is a case later on in the Gemara. He says a case that cannot be decided in a manner which there is no deterrent for taking a false claim in court. He says that with regards to the case where two people deposited money with the same person. Now, one deposited 100 dinars and one deposited 200 dinars. And the shamer forgot which of them deposited the large sum. So each claimed ownership of the large sum and was prepared to take an oath to that effect. So the Chacham say that each should receive 100 and the remainder should be mullah hachiyah. It should be held until the Eliyahu Navi comes to resolve this suffix. Now, Rabbi S argues and says, he asks, if so, if the swindler is going to get the 100, so what did he lose by claiming that the 200 is his? Because at least 100 he gets back. Ella, rather, what does Rabbi S say? Rather, the entire Pikadon will be placed in a place of the Eliyahu. So, what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah says, when each one says Kol Shali, we say Achleiku. We don't say Munach Hashav Eliyahu. So, it must be our Mishnah is not like Rabbi S. So, the word says, Elamai Rabbanan. So, are you going to say that the Mishnah should go like Rabbanan, suggesting that the Mishnah, in accordance with the Chacham, disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, with Rabbi Yasi? Even though Rabban Hashar Yumanach Hashav Eliyahu, since the Chacham say that the remainder is placed in a safe place until the Eliyahu comes, this case of the Mishnah concerning the garment is also comparable to the remainder of the case of the deposit. The Sveki, as it's a suffix to whom the entire garment belongs to. So the should therefore be placed according to the Chachamim in a safe place until Ashiyavim Mulach Eliyahu. So where says Haimai? What is the comparison? Granted, if you say that the Mishnah, and according to the opinion of the Chachamim, Hasam Davade Haimon the Chad Min Hayud Amri Rabbanan. There, in the case of the Chachamim, in the case of the Bikadon, where there's 100 dinars certainly belonging to only one of them. So, Amri Rabbanan Yemunach Hashav Eliyahu. So, in the case of the Bikadon, for sure, 100 dinars certainly belongs to only one of them. The Chachamim say that it's placed at Shiyavim Eliyahu. The Tavayu, here in the case of the Mishnah where there is room to say that it belongs to both of them, the Chachamim will say that divided with a Shua. But if you say this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi S, so there's a Shaila. In the case where there's certain that there are 100 dinars that belong to one of the litigants, and there's 100 dinars that belong to the other litigants, nevertheless, what does he say? That the entire thing should be placed until Eliyahu Navi comes. So the Chad Min Hayud, well, here, where there's room to say that it all belongs to only one of them, like all you get on the more so, it's not clear that it should be. All the more so, it is not clear that it should be placed in a safe place until the Eliyahu comes. Why? As one of the claims may be entirely fraudulent. The Gemara says, "Afilu teimah Rebbeisi." You can even say that the Mishnah is according to the Rebbeisi. Hasam v'ad ikaramai. In the case of the Pikadon, there's for sure a swindler between the two depositors. Here, are you going to say that they're both swindlers? Whether the swindler over here, you can see that they both lifted up the garment at the same time, and therefore there's no reason to give a knas by placing it in a safe place. Inami, alternatively, you can distinguish and say, Hasam konis l'Rabbanan, Hasam konis l'Rebbeisi d'Ramai ke'ech d'leidir. There, Rebbeisi penalized the swindler by confiscating his deposit so that he will admit that he lied in order to receive his original deposit of 100 dinars from the shamer. Here, in the case of the garment, what loss would a swindler incur that would prompt him to admit that he is lying? The item is placed in the safe place, he loses nothing. The Gemara says, Tinach Metziah. The distinction works out well in the case of a found item where he did not pay anything. He has no incentive to admit that he lied. What are you going to say in regards to buying and selling? Both parties paid for the item and preferred to receive the item. Rather, the distinction is clearly, as we explained initially, the difference between the cases is that in the Mishnah, there's no certainty that one of them is lying. So the Gemara says, Bein l'Rabbanan and Bein l'Rebbeisi, both according to the opinion of the Chacham and according to the opinion of Rebbeisi, there, with regard to a case of a storekeeper lying on the ledger, it's unclear why the money is not held until the matter is clarified. Now, what's that case referring to? It's referring to a case when an employer tells the storekeeper to give food to his labor instead of his salary. And later the storekeeper claims that he gave it to him, but the laborer claims they did not receive it. So both parties therefore claim payment from the employer. Now, so what did the Mishnah say in Shavuos? Zeh nishba b'neitel. This one, the storekeeper takes an oath that he gave the food to the laborer. Zeh nishba b'neitel, and he receives payment. And that one, the laborer takes an oath that he was not given any food. It takes a salary from the employer. So the question is, what is the difference in that case that we do not say, take the money from the employer? And it's placed in a safe place until the Navi comes. Apparently, you should say this because there's certainly a swindler amongst the litigants, since it's impossible that both of the storekeeper and the laborer are telling the truth. So Amri also in the Chacham said in response, this is the reason that the money is not set aside, because the storekeeper can say to the employer, I carried out your shluchas to give the money, to give the food to the laborer, and I have dealings only with you. What business do I have to do with the hired labor? Even if he takes the shvua that he did not receive the food, I don't trust him with the shvua. You are the one who trusted him. So you're the one who trusted him, as you did not say to me, give him the food in the presence of the witness. Therefore, you're obligated to pay me. If you have grievance, settle with your employee. So and the hired labor can also say to the balabayis, I worked for you. What relationship do I have with the storekeeper? Even if he takes an oath to me that he gave me the change, he's not trustworthy to me by virtue of the oath. Therefore, both parties take an oath and take payment from the employer. A person says to another person, I have 100 dinars in your possession. You borrowed from me, you didn't pay it back. And the guy says, I don't owe you anything. Nothing of yours is in my possession. And witnesses testified that he has 50 dinars in his rishus, or he owes him $50. He gives him 50 zuz, and takes an oath about the remainder, that he did not borrow the 50 remaining dinars from him. Now, why? This is a kal v'chemer. And that one admits the part of his daf-yomi-bava-metziah, the din is, so he's saying that this should not be any stronger than a daf-yomi-bava-metziah. Now, what does that mean? One who admits to part of a claim that is brought against him is obligated to take an oath that he owes him no more than the amount that he admits that he have borrowed. And we learn from a kal v'chemer, as the admission of one's own mouth should not carry greater weight than the testimony of witnesses. Since in this case, witnesses testify that he owes an amount equal to part of the claim, he is all the more so obligated to take an oath with regard to the rest of the sum. And the Tana, the Mishnah, also taught a similar halacha. In the case of two people who came to Beis Din holding a garment, each one says, I found it. The other person says, I found it. So what's the din? Each litigant takes a shvua and yachliku, they divide it. And on sad given the toughest, and here in the case of the found item, since each litigant is holding part of the garment, and on sad my toughest we are witnesses that it's clear to us that what he's grasping is his. My toughest and this one is grasping is also his. And what do we see? Yeshava makes a shvua. Now, what does it mean that the admission of one's oath one's mouth should not carry greater weight than the testimony of the witnesses? Isn't the comparison to the case of the admission to part of the claim self-evident? So my answer is, but I say that it is only in the case of the admission of one's own mouth that the Torah imposes an oath upon him, and according to the explanation of Rabbah. He says, why does a made the mitzvahs have to swear? There's a chazaka that a person does not have the chutzpah by lying in the presence of his creditor who had done him a favor by lending him money to deny it. And this person denies part of the claim, actually wants to deny the whole thing to exempt himself. And why doesn't he deny everything? Because the person does not have the chutzpah. Now, in order to show this person wants to admit to the creditor with regards to the entire debt. Why didn't he admit it? The reason why he didn't admit to the claim is because he just wants to. He was evading the creditor and thought, I'll continue to do so until I have money. Apparently, when I have money, I'll pay him back. The Torah says, impose an oath upon him in order to ensure that he will admit to him with regard to all the chayv. But with regards to the testimony of the witnesses, renders him chayv to be part of the debt. As one cannot say this explanation since the logic applies only when it is the debtor admitting to part of the claim. And you might say that he has no intention to repay the chayv at all. It's completely dishonest and therefore his oath is worthless. Therefore, it teaches the kal v'chemer that the defendant's obligation to take an oath is derived by mitzvah kal v'chemer. My kal v'chemer, what is the kal v'chemer? Ma piv she'en mechayv imam mechayv shvua. If I made the mixes with his mouth, which does not render him chayv to pay the money, he admitted owing. Nevertheless, obligates him to make a shvua. So, with regards to money, which does render him chayv, which witnesses do render him chayv to pay the money. Does it not make sense that they should obligate him to take an oath? So the Gemara says, but does the admission of his own mouth not render him chayav to pay money? We know that the status of the admission of the litigant is similar to that of 100 witnesses. So my answer is, my moment, what is the money that one is not chayav to pay based on his own admission? Is a knas. It's referring to the payment of a knas. In all cases, the Torah imposes a fine. If the defendant admits his own liability voluntarily, he is not required to pay it. Therefore, the kal v'chemer is as follows: if the admission of one own's mouth, which does not render him chayav to pay a knas, mechayv shvua, does mechayv shvua, edim shemechayv is a knas. Edim which will make him mechayv a knas, any edim shemechayv is a shvua, does not make sense that is mechayv a shvua. So the Gemara says, malapim shekem mechayv a carbon. By a person's mouth, it makes him chayav a carbon. One who admits that he transgressed the isser is obligated to bring an offering. What would you say in regards to the admission with regards to the testimony of witnesses, which is in the case they testify that one transgressed the isser does not obligate him to bring a carbon? It's not that a person is obligated to pay to bring a carbon from Adam from a kal v'chemer. The time we learned in the Mishnah, if two witnesses say you ate forbidden fats, he says, I did not eat it. Meir says he is chayav to bring a carbon and chachamim paid him. Meir says to the chachamim, if two witnesses can cause a person to receive a death penalty, which is a severe penalty, can they not cause one to receive the light penalty having to bring a carbon? So the chacham said to him, what if he would say, I said intentionally, would he be exempt since one does not bring a carbon? For Mazid, testimony of witnesses has to no bearing in this matter, as they cannot prove that this transgression was shaded. Therefore, even if he claims that he did not sin at all, the testimony does not obligate him to bring a carbon. Rather, what is notable about the admission of one's mouth is notable in that it renders a robber liable to bring a guilt offering. One who admits that he robbed another is required to bring a guilt offering for atonement, whereas if he witnesses testify that he robbed another, he's not obligated to bring a carbon. Asham. So my answer is Asham hainu carbon. The guilt offering is the same as a carbon, which there's a machlekes between the man and the chacham as to whether the testimony of witnesses render one chayav to bring a carbon. Rather, by the mouth that it renders him to be chayav chemish. If witnesses testify that he unlawfully possessed the money of another, he's not chayav to be a chemish. That's not a question. The mayor, the mayor Shvile, Keich, the Mechav Kavim Kavachemer, so it's Chayav Karma, it's Mechav Chemish Kavachemer. Other Malapish can Eine Bakosher Zama. By mouth, it's notable in that it's not subject to contradiction or to refutation as applies to the testimony of the Chosher Bazama. Tamer Beidim Shieshtim Bakosher Bazama. The testimony of witnesses is weaker in some aspect than the Das Piv. Rather, we derive the halacha from Eidechad. Ma Eidechad she'ein mechayv mamin. By Eidechad, we know is a person. Eidechad cannot mechayv the person money, but mechayv shvua. He could be mechayv the person of shvua. Eidem shemechayv nesim mamin. So it's not logical that the testimony of two witnesses was to render one chayav to pay money. Any din shemechayv nesim shvua does not make sense to obligate him to make a shvua. So it says Mala Eidechad shkin al mashu meidu nishba. How could you compare to Eidechad? In the case of the Eidechad, he takes an oath with regard to the matter concerning which he testifies. Now with regard to the other claims raised by the claimant. Will you say the same with regard to two witnesses, in which case the defendant takes an oath with regard to the claim that he denies, and now with regard to the debt about which they testify? Rabbi says, I see Megillah Shvua the Eidechad. Chiya's Kavachemer is derived from the extension of an oath that the testimony of one witness obligates him to take. Once the defendant is obligated to take an oath, the Teveah can demand that he takes an oath with regards to other claims that he has against him. That's called the Megillah Shvua. So when it says Bala Megillah Shvua, the Eidechad can Shvua by the case of a Megillah Shvua, the Shvua now obligates him to take more Shvuas. Tamer Bein, the Mammon who can Mechaybe. You say the same in the case of the witnesses who testify. In the case of witnesses whose testimony renders the defendant liable to pay money. So when it says the mouth can prove that an element other than the oath can cause the defendant to be obligated to take an oath with regards to the rest of the claim. So when it says and nothing is common. Now, what will be the common denominator? The common denominator is that in these cases, come before the court with the claim and its denial. And the defendant is obligated to take a shua. I will also include the obligation to take an oath. In the case of Rechia, where there is testimony of two witnesses about which part of the debt, which comes before the court with the claim and its denial, and therefore the defendant is obligated to take an oath. So when it says, how could you, the Tzad Shava, which they do not assume the presumption status of one who falsely denies the chayv? Are you going to say the same with regards to the case of witnesses who contradict the defendant's denial of the plaintiff's claim, where the defendant assumes the chazaka status of one who falsely denies? In this case, he's no longer deemed trustworthy, and his oath may not be credible.
Well, I don't. I remember that